Chicago.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. I'm Nathan, your host and senior producer of the podcast. You can find the Bridging Chicago podcast at our website, www.bridgingchicago.com, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Today, I'm joined by Jesse Iniguez, the founder of Back of the Yards Coffee, who alongside Myra Hernandez opened their first coffee shop here in Chicago in the Back of the Yards neighborhood. And I say first because I believe there's going to be more.
That's right.
But for now, you have the one here in the Back of the Yards neighborhood here in Chicago, right?
That's correct, yes.
Awesome. So can you tell me, we are Bridging Chicago, and so we always like to start with your connection to the city. So were you born here, raised here, or you moved here from somewhere?
Yeah, both Myra and I were born here in Chicago. Specifically, actually Myra was born in Mexico but raised in Back of the Yards. I was born and raised in Back of the Yards. Our parents both migrated from Mexico.
Yeah.
And they came to Back of the Yards because there was jobs and cheap housing.
Yeah.
That's really what it was.
Okay.
Back of the Yards it's known as the Back of the Yards because literally behind the old Union Stockyard. So, yeah.
Yeah. Chicago is so big on its neighborhoods. So many people have such a connection with it. They know its history. They really feel like a part of that neighborhood. Do you feel that way in Back of the Yards? Do you what's the energy, the vibrancy of the neighborhood?
I do. I think I want to say Back of the Yards in particular has a certain grit.
Okay.
There's people that grow up there. You kind of when you see them somewhere else, there's that connection of growing up. Growing up it was a little rough. Things have changed a little bit. It's still not perfect, but there's a lot of good things that are happening in the community. A lot of great people have come out of Back of the Yards. In fact, one of the farmers that we work with from Honduras actually went to the same grammar school that I went to. He's a little bit older than me, but different generation.
Yeah.
But, grew up in Back of the Yards, and, we just met in Seattle at a coffee expo, and right away there was that energy that connected us,
Yeah.
One of the things I love about the neighborhood is that you can walk around and people say hello.
Yeah.
You can walk to the tortilleria, get fresh tortillas, the taqueria, and obviously, fresh coffee, the best coffee. And so there's a lot going on in the neighborhood, and for all of, the negativity that it gets sometimes from the media and because, they show what some of the things that are happening, but there's a lot of, great things that are happening, a lot of amazing people, and I just love being part of that community.
I always feel like Chicago is a really tough city to live in the way, you got to have a little thick skin to live here. It's a Midwestern city. It's friendly, probably more friendly than some other big cities, but you still have to have some thick skin. You have to have some toughness to live in this city. And so I think no matter where you're at here, it takes a certain kind of person to really appreciate what Chicago has to offer. And unfortunately, nationally, we don't always get portrayed as the best, safest, cleanest city. But from what we see in these neighborhoods, the people in it they're just such hard workers. And it's like they're not going to let anything stop them.
That's right.
From really trying to do their best. And not just that, but do good for other people there.
Exactly. And Back of the Yards is a microcosm of exactly that. Mm-hmm. Exactly what you just said. It's, you basically just described my neighborhood.
I haven't been there, but I definitely want to go. Not that I haven't been there that I know of, but one of the things I really love about this podcast is discovering all these new places.
Exactly.
It's a huge city, so it's impossible to go to everywhere. That's right. But going to all these different neighborhoods is really cool.
It is, and it's only 20 minutes, 15 minutes from downtown, depending on the traffic. And it's a great location, I think. And it used to be, the butcher house of the world. They used to ship in, the cows and the pigs, and then they'd come, in the trains, and they go back as meat. And so a lot of people, even if they weren't from Back of the Yards, are connected somehow or some way to the neighborhood.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about what makes Back of the Yards unique in the way of if someone wanted to start a business, when you think about starting a business, you think, oh, it's easiest to do downtown, River North, Gold Coast, and those areas where there's a lot of tourist foot traffic, and so you're pretty much going to always be guaranteed to have tourists walking by. Sure. But out in the sort of outer neighborhoods, it really is obviously more local traffic. So what is different about thinking about starting a business there? Like, what are some things that you had to think about that maybe they don't think about here?
Sure. I think, well, for one is, Chicago in general is a great coffee roaster city. There's a lot of really good coffee roasters in the city of Chicago. Okay. There's a lot of really good coffee shops. The thing is, I think it was like 95% when we first opened, 95% of the coffee shops in Chicago or Chicagoland area were on the downtown and the northeast side of Chicago. Yeah. Areas on the southwest side, like back of the Yards, on the northwest side, where there's high concentration of Latinos, there weren't any coffee shops. And so it was a little scary at first because I would think, Starbucks does their research, right? Some of these other, coffee companies, they do their research. The thing is, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, and I think part of the problem with, some of these larger corporations is that they don't have people like us in the C-suites, in the director role. And so, coffee's a big thing in our community. And you think it's growing in Latin America, right? Yeah. And so we did some research and we found that, Latinos drink more coffee than any other ethnicity in the U.S., including over Caucasian. It's like 69% of us drink at least 1 cup of coffee a day. Wow. Versus the second place would be Caucasian at like 58. So it's an 11-point difference. It's pretty high. Yeah. The thing is, again, we don't have coffee shops, and then the quality of the coffee that that's available in our community is not the highest. So, and knowing that, and knowing that I would have to travel long distance, costing me time and money to access good coffee, or stick to the cheap stuff. I thought, maybe there's an opportunity, and we just started letting people know. And the day that we opened up our shop, we had a line out the door. So wow. Yeah.
Do you think there's something that makes it really tough for people who are in the neighborhood, who know the neighborhood, who grew up there, who are familiar with what the energy is there, that makes it difficult for those people to start these businesses? Because chains are going to be everywhere. I'm sure there's probably Dunkin's there and other chains there. But for people who grew up there, or who really know what it's like there, what are some things that really make it difficult for people to start things like what you did?
I think the biggest, obstacle, even to us and to this day, one of the things that has limited our growth is access to capital. And I think, I think immigrants by nature are entrepreneurs. To come to a different country and where you don't know the language, coming from a hot, where my family from, hot 80-degree weather all the time, to some of our harsh winters in Chicago. Into that weather. So, and I think there's a lot of good ideas, people who are just looking for ways to make it. But again, it's just the biggest obstacle is the access to capital. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. We're as we're kind of growing and developing, we're now providing opportunities for other small businesses to learn from our mistakes. I would say failure is a privilege. Yeah. And we're helping them get started and give them the opportunity to be successful from day one. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that failure is a privilege, because I think one of the really important things in growing these kind of businesses and minority-owned businesses and female-owned businesses is understanding what role privilege plays in all of this, because you have to be willing to take on some level of failure and understand that you're going to have to fight for resources in ways that other people may not have to. Mm-hmm. And so for you, how do you kind of look at this and say, okay, you were able to do this, you were able to fight through, you were able to start this up, not knowing if it was going to succeed or not, and that had some level of privilege to it. Yeah. So how do you sort of take that into what you do and how you carry out that social responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's why it's important, because part of knowledge, to me, knowledge is meant to be shared, right? Yeah. And so just because we started down here doesn't mean everybody should as well. I mean, and so there's certain things that we have acquired throughout the process that we want others to learn as well. Part of what we do is we have a social mission as well, so we give back, and for us, it's part of our DNA because both Myra and I, we benefited from programs that helped us in the neighborhood, that got us to scholarships. So for us, we see that as a recipe for success.
Yeah.
And so now that we have the resources, again, instead of starting at the bottom, we're trying to help, stepping stool, right? To get us, our folks from the community, more options and more opportunities, to grow by providing jobs that are meaningful and that pay above minimum wage, that pay living wages. These are things that are important to us because, we're trying to set the example and set a standard. I saw outside the Forge magazine I'm like, I don't aspire to be a billionaire. I think it's about sharing that wealth, and it's and bringing other people there. What's the saying? Lift as you climb. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do. I think we're trying to prove that you could be a profitable business that's mission driven and that's doing good, right? We don't have to be greedy, right?
Yeah.
And still provide high quality coffee, still provide good service, but at the same time, when you come to see us, you know that you're contributing to a good cause simply by buying a cup of coffee.
Yeah. I think the good cause goes. It's not just like you're going to turn around and give those funds to other people.
Right.
That may happen, but that's not just what it's about. It's also about one of the things that people don't always understand is that yes, it's about access to resources, but it's just about being able to know those resources are there.
Exactly.
I've heard from a lot of people that they say we just don't know, and so how do we find out the same things that other people are finding out? Where like maybe it's about scholarships or it's about they say, oh, I would love to go to college, I have the grades to go to college, but I can't go to college, and it's like, well, you can, but you just don't know these resources are available to you.
And they're there. And to your point of scholarships, I remember a professor of mine, a Latina professor, told me one time, he's like, you know why Latinos don't get scholarships? And she says, because we don't apply.
Yeah.
And so that stuck with me. And so, part of, how, we've gotten grants, especially during the pandemic. But, prior to the pandemic, there were very few business grants. And, we got the FedEx small business grant. And we got it because we applied.
Yeah.
And it's just, we apply until, get a lot of no's. But when we get a yes, we develop good relationships, get much needed resources. And so yeah, that's been my motto ever since, just apply.
Yeah. When companies like FedEx come alongside people, partner with them, and they do it in a way where you get to do what you want to do,
right?
And you get to do it in the way that you have envisioned doing it. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think same like we're doing with some of these smaller businesses that we're kind of helping now.
Yeah.
That's basically what FedEx has done with us. Aside from the funds from the grant, we've had opportunities like recently. We're with the E-Commerce Learning Lab that they fund. That's helping us really revamp and rework our online presence so that we can have a good another source of income there.
Yeah.
I got to go to NASCAR in Daytona. That's something I've never done before, and really experience that sport and different experiences. They've taken us to Memphis, and we've met with some of their directors and experts in their field, and it's just that access that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, to be honest, part of what we're doing is, we're piggybacking off of what FedEx has done with us.
Yeah. And I think that's the idea. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, I really like that lift as you climb, because some people will say, well, when I get there, then that's when I'll help other people up. But it's like, I think it's really hard that, when you get there, it's hard not to be greedy, because everyone wants to think, if I were a millionaire, I'd give half of it away. It's like, it's great to say when you're not a millionaire.
Exactly.
But I think lift as you climb, it really shows that, it's like it's easier to do as you go because the lessons are fresh.
Exactly.
And the resources are going back into the neighborhood and back into the people who really need them.
Right, and we're doing them as we're going. So like it's part of our DNA. It's baked into our mission. That we call it SEED, which stands for Social Impact, Economic Development, Environmental Responsibility, and Direct Relationships. So everything that we do involves either one or all four of the pillars. Like for example, hiring local. That's both social impact and economic development because we're helping, the economics of the community. And you're right. I think, a lot of people say, when I become a millionaire or whatever, I'm going to do this. Or the thing is, that never happens because you're always kind of pushing the bar further and further ahead. Yeah. And, but if it's part of what you already do, it's already part of our expenses, it's part of
built in.
Built in, exactly. Yeah. So for us, it makes it that much easier, and we don't feel like we're the ones contributing. It's our customers that are contributing by purchasing.
Wow.
There was University of Chicago a professor that won the Nobel Peace Prize. His name is escaping me now, but Richard Thaler. There you go. His whole research was, make things easy for people to do them. Otherwise, they won't.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing. We're making it easy for people to contribute to something positive by doing something they're already going to do, purchase coffee.
Right. Let's talk about the coffee for a second because it's important.
That's right.
Admittedly, not a coffee drinker, but I'll enjoy a nice pumpkin spice latte in the fall and then maybe some like summer. But what is it about the coffee itself that draws people in? And when you were sort of crafting this coffee, what was important to you to make sure to have qualities about the coffee?
Sure. So for me, first time I walked into a coffee shop was my freshman year of college. Like I honestly didn't know these things existed. Maybe on TV or shows and stuff like that, but it was like a vague kind of sense. I never actually walked into one. So when I walked into there, just the vibe of the space, the smell of the coffee is inviting. To me, it was a safe space where I can enjoy a good cup of coffee. The coffee itself kind of, to me, brings people together. It's you meet people at a coffee shop.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a bar without the alcohol, right? You still maintain, your five senses, right? And so to me, that's what it does. And then as I've gotten more and more into, the coffee world and really appreciate the process of coffee, how it's made and the people that grow it and how long they have to wait for it to, bloom for the first time. And then, coffee comes in a little tree that, it's a cherry tree, right? Mm-hmm. But it's coffee cherries. And it's a seed. That's why our seed model comes from it. People call it coffee beans, but they're actual seeds. And these seeds are rock hard. Like they smell like wet grass. You try buying them, you're gonna break your teeth. And at some point, someone discovered that if you put them in a 400 degree oven, and that it'll have a Maillard reaction, and that it'll change color, kind of, and then pop like a popcorn, and you're essentially drawing out the moisture, and it goes from this green thing that smells like wet grass to this brown thing that smells amazing, and it
does smell.
Exactly. And so all that to me, like it drew me, and then to the fact that, like, depending on how many seconds more or less you roast it, you can change the flavor profile.
Yeah.
If you combine beans from different regions, that creates a different flavor profile. It's science, it's art. And so we've worked really hard to come up with really good blends and really good roasts. And so that's something that I'm super proud of. And it's fun, and I'm glad you mentioned, because we don't often talk about that, because, we often talk more about, our work and our mission, which is the most important part for me. But it's important for people to know that our coffee is still top notch.
Right. Well, and I think that's part of the thing is, if the coffee's not good, people won't shop.
Exactly.
They're going to go to the chain. They're going to go somewhere else. The product still has to work.
Exactly, 100%. And our 47th Street blend, that was our first blend, and we worked hard to coming up with that flavor profile, because what we wanted was we know that the majority of our customers in the community had not been exposed to specialty coffee, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted something that was very similar to what they're familiar with, but then that had something extra at the end that was quality that they didn't recognize but they enjoyed, right? So to me, our 47 Tree Blend, that's what I drink every day.
Yeah.
And we did it with our customers in mind.
That's awesome. I was interested, you said something about safe spaces. You mentioned safe spaces in there. And for me, a safe space it doesn't just mean you walk in and you feel like you're not going to get hurt, you're not going to get, whatever. You feel safe physically, but it also means you walk in and you see people who you feel represented by.
Exactly.
And so it's, you see all kinds of different people, females, males, people of other genders. It's like you see you there. And I think for a long time, we have gone to places where we don't see us in them. Exactly. And so for you, what was important about, like, when people walk in, you want them to feel represented in your shop?
Of course. I mean, particularly, people from our community, I mean, one of the things that someone told us was like, oh, this coffee shop looks like it belongs downtown. I'm like, no, it belongs here.
Yeah.
Like, we can have nice things, right? But it's also inviting in that, like, the people that work there are your neighbors. Yeah. They're people that the coffee and the things that we sell there are familiar to us and to our community. And that's not something that you necessarily find in other coffee shops, right? Yeah. But even like for me, one of the things that I really liked about the coffee shop experience in general, and one of the things that we wanted to do and continue to do at the shop is provide a space where you can just like get away from the outside world.
Yeah.
You want to take your laptop and work. You want to read a book. You want to write. That's what I used to do. I grew up in a 3-bedroom household with 7 siblings and my parents. So as you can imagine, the chaos, and many of them are older. They have kids.
Yeah.
So aside from locking myself in the room to be able to focus on my homework, having a coffee shop allowed me the space, to just think, and that sometimes I couldn't do in my own house.
Yeah, that's a lot of kids in that house, but
small Mexican family.
That's a lot of people in a house, but and I think that those are the stories that it's just like you can relate to those stories because those are families, those are people who are just living life, and then when you grow it into something that you're doing, I think is really cool. For you, where do you want to see this go? What do you want to do with Back of the Yards Coffee?
I want it to be a national brand. We want it to be, we want to compete with the Starbucks of the world. Better quality, of course, right? But no, I think the model, more than anything, because I think the model that we have can grow and be applied. Yeah. Just like I mentioned in Chicago, where areas where high concentration of Latinos, there's a lack of coffee shops. We looked at top 10 cities with high concentration of Latinos, and they're just same thing, no coffee shops.
Yeah.
And so we feel that there's an opportunity to do that and to grow, and so if our community and the people like us and they allow us to grow, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that that is one thing I do love about Chicago is when it sees people succeed, it steps up to that challenge.
Right.
Chicago wants you to grow. They want you to succeed. And I think that once they see that's happening, they really step up and they really, what can we do? How can we come around you? And I think that's so great too.
Exactly. And then that's one of the reasons you mentioned earlier is like, there's a certain grit, a certain spirit of Chicago, like that when they're, we're the city with the most beautiful flag. Like we adapted it. Like who wears their flag on their chest? Like outside of a Chicagoan, right? And so I think, we're very proud of businesses that start here, of people that succeed from here. And so I feel that definitely, and that I have a lot of support from my fellow Chicagoans, and I'm excited to grow and to continue to provide opportunities to other communities and other folks, and to continue having the support of our fellow Chicagoans.
Yeah, and we absolutely want to continue our support. We don't want to just have you on a podcast and say thanks for coming and then send you on your way. We definitely love to partner together I want to come to the shop and experience the shop. If you're a non-coffee drinker, I'm assuming there's stuff still there for you.
Yeah, and you mentioned the pumpkin spice latte. Yeah. So I would say we have our own Mexican spice, café de olla, and it's very good. It's my grandmother's recipe, and it has cinnamon, raw sugar, molasses, and Mexican spices. So it's very similar to a pumpkin spice minus a pumpkin.
Yeah. But still like some it's interesting flavors, and I think for me it's like, it's got to be interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what makes coffee. It is actually pretty cool because it's like you can start with this one thing and then you can add on all these flavors and you can come up with so many different flavor profiles, even though it's the same bean that starts it.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely, and it's
or seed as I learned.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's coffee to me is a beautiful thing, and again, like I've had the privilege of actually going to the farms and seeing the people that pick the cherries and that do the work that often get forgotten, and I've been there and working with them, and it's hard work, and so I only do it for a little bit, and then I can get back home and they do it, they go up and down the mountains 8 times a day, and
wow.
And so to me it's this thing that is only grows in a certain area that we bring out here and we make it something different. So it is a beautiful thing, and it's a thing to be shared, and I to me that's coffee is been the best thing for me. Yeah.
Tell us where your shop is located.
So it's back of the Yards in south side of Chicago, 2059 West 47th Street. It's on 47th and Hoyne.
Okay. And if people are using public transit, is there an easy way to get there?
Yeah, you can take, Orange Line, and Ashton bus and 47th Street bus, passes through there. You can also find us online at backoftheyardscoffee.com or by.coffee. And we're in, look for us in other coffee shops and restaurants, and hopefully in a couple of months we'll be also at grocery stores.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. I'm sure the model that you have is so inspirational. It's not. I think obviously it'll work, but I think it's really inspiring too, and I think people will really connect with that. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and sharing with us. It's been so cool to hear what you're doing, and I mean we hope that you grow exponentially.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and we want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter, where our handle is @BridgingChicago. You can also find us on LinkedIn by searching Bridging Chicago, or of course by visiting www.bridgingchicago.com. And be sure to check out Back of the Yards Coffee on Facebook and check out their Instagram at Back of the Yards Coffee Co. Follow them on Twitter at @TheYards_coffee. Thanks again for tuning into this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Jesse, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solutions Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including, but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.